Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. It's Fran here and I'm back with my final team selection. I really think this is going to be my final team. Definitely I will be live streaming for you guys at the deadline, but it might be a possibility where one or two changes will be made. I really think this is going to be the tactical structure that I play with. It is going to be a 4-back structure, so I have moved away from the back 5 back into a back 4. What you can see clearly changes is Gabriel is out of the team. Robertson is also out of the team. And because of that, you can probably guess who I've gone for in the midfield and how things have changed around. Because of how interesting the 8.0 midfielders are, I have really put a lot of thought into the Luis Diaz versus Saka debate, and I'll talk about that when I talk about the midfielders. But ultimately, there were other options in the midfield that I had to think about that I was missing, in my opinion, in my previous draft that I wanted to leave an open option for, really. I have opted to go for Sanchez and Ward as my keeper rotation. You can see here that Ward is going to be my starting keeper just because he plays Brentford in game week 1. There might be a chance that Ward doesn't get the starting position for Leicester, and he is obviously going to be competing in that spot with another 4.0 keeper from Leicester. But realistically, I don't like Leicester's fixtures in isolation. I really like the partnership with Sanchez. I think he provides good value as a 4.5 keeper. Yes, this season is a little bit different because options like Ederson and Alisson are much cheaper, but I still thought it made a lot of sense to go for the Sanchez and Ward rotation, and it presented itself as a really good opportunity, in my opinion, to still put the funds in my defense, in my midfielders, and even in my forwards, as I usually like to do, as opposed to going for a more expensive keeper. I've stuck with Trent Cancelo. This time you can actually see that James has been reinserted to the draft. So last week I did sort of debut a structure where I had Perisic in the team with 0.5 in the bank, but I really think this is the time to actually think about how do I optimize around Perisic. Ultimately, Perisic has a crucial problem, which is game week 2. It seems like he doesn't hold too much value if you don't have a way around it, and I've tried to create the draft within a structure so that I can accommodate for the fact that Perisic has such a poor game week 2. As far as James, yes, it's going to be a mirror matchup, but I do think Chelsea at home versus Tottenham has always historically been quite a good matchup, a game that Chelsea has always dominated. They've been able to keep the score sheet quite low versus Tottenham team. I hope they could do the same. I also think that when you're looking at Chelsea's fixtures, ultimately, even though James could be playing right centre back at times, even though he could be playing right wing back 50% of the time, I still think he holds a lot of great value as a 6.0 pick as long as he's not injured. We will be starting the season with really, really good fixtures, with exception to the Tottenham game, and ultimately, when Chelsea's at home, they're actually versus some of the tougher opponents. So, for example, when we're talking about Everton, Leeds, Southampton, they're playing these teams away, but they're much easier matchups, and I can still see James getting attacking hauls, or hopefully defensive hauls, as this Chelsea team has still strengthened in defense, right? Where I think from the position where they had lost Rudiger, getting players like Koulibaly in have been quite crucial. It seems like they might also lock down Cucurella, so that could change the team up as well, hopefully for the better. And for now, I think it just makes a lot more sense to go with someone like James because he is the safer option. As far as Perisic, I have mentioned that he creates a few problems for owners who have moved into a Perisic structure. Yes, I think in the previous tactical template, I did incorporate having 0.5 in the bank, but because I had Bailey as a starter, that created a lot of complications because unless I really wanted to rotate with another 5.0 option at the midfield, there just wasn't really someone who could replace Perisic effectively in game week 2. And that's why when we look at the midfield, you can see that I've gone for Neto, Salah, Luis Diaz, and Martinelli. And the reason why I've done that is so that I can actually put Bailey on the bench. I think ultimately when I look at my team and think about all the assets individually, Bailey probably is still the worst player in game week 1, even though he does get to play what seems like a very, very weak Bournemouth side. I just like Martinelli just a touch more than Bailey in game week 1. I think there's a bit more of a guarantee there because he's had such a good preseason. I still think Arsenal can do well, even though they have a tough Crystal Palace game to start the season with. As far as Neto, though, what I do like about him at 5.5 is he is someone that I can pivot into. There are a lot of assets right now where if we're thinking about even teams like Leeds with Rodrigo and Aronson as options, because I've invested that 0.5 into someone like Bailey, I can still see myself rotating around the midfield quite easily. There are some other options at 5.5, even at Wolves themselves. And if I'm not, if let's say I'm not very, very confident in Martinelli in 4 weeks' time, when maybe Smith Rowe is back into the team, then I can think about tinkering and playing around with these assets. And I think Neto just is super interesting to start the season with, as someone who will be playing a very dynamic role just like Bailey, but I have a little bit more confidence in with the lack of rotation that Wolves have. Ultimately, with Jimenez being injured, even though Neto might not be part of a team that creates a lot of chances, I think I just have much more confidence in his expected minutes, and I don't have the same with Bailey. And it was a little harder in my previous structure if I was, let's say, to start the season with 0.5 in the bank, to maybe watch Neto do well and then just move away from Bailey. It just doesn't feel like it made a lot of sense. So in this structure here, I feel like I've covered both my bases there, getting both the interesting differential midfielders that I still think are incredibly well priced. And what Bailey would provide to me in Game Week 2 is a replacement to Perisic. For me, Perisic, when I look at my team now, is going to be the worst option in Game Week 2. And when I have Perisic in Game Week 2 on the bench, I will have Bailey instead playing versus Everton at home, which is going to be hopefully a very, very good game for Aston Villa. And we know this Everton team is a team that we'd also like to target. So for me, two good matchups for Bailey. And hopefully he either kicks on and becomes a developed part of this Aston Villa side and can establish himself as the key player. Or I can just simply move away from Bailey later on when I've hopefully rolled the transfer somewhere around game weeks 3, 4, and beyond. As far as the rest of the team, you can see I've clearly gone for Luis Diaz and Martinelli as opposed to Saka and Martinelli. And this already tells you one thing. I've opted away from the triple Arsenal team. I think what I like about Luis Diaz at the start with versus Saka is just because the Arsenal team is front loaded with Crystal Palace, and I didn't really want to go for a triple Arsenal attack structure. Yes, we should always consider assets in FPL isolated, but I think that there is an argument to be said that when you are stacking up 3 attacking pieces, you are definitely putting your eggs in one sort of basket. Yes, Arsenal are a team that we expect to do incredibly well, and perhaps they'll all individually return a lot of value as assets over time. I think just as a manager, there is a little bit of this inkling in me that it is almost like an overinvestment in a sense. Whereas with Liverpool, I have less of a fear of that guarantee. I can move away from Luis Diaz if I feel like I've made a mistake over Saka. But ultimately right now, if I'm just comparing Luis Diaz and Saka like for like, even if Saka's on pens, I feel like Luis Diaz is just a touch more interesting because Liverpool creates so many chances and there's a lot of history to back that up, whereas Arsenal do have a little bit more to grow in that sense. Saka's a young player. I think maybe I could own up to my mistake if it is a mistake by game week 2 and beyond, and maybe I could move away from Luis Diaz by the time they play United. That could be a good example of me moving into an asset, especially if, let's say, Bournemouth are super tempting and super easy to target. Why not just move into Saka then? And that's kind of my thinking for now, and also exactly why I didn't opt for a third Arsenal defensive option. I feel like one of the issues that going for Ramsdale does present is if Saka does end up being the best 8.0 mid option in FPL, how are you going to do that if you started with Ramsdale in your team? Perhaps you would say if you roll, it's the exact same logic anyways. You're moving 2 players like for like, but we always talk about keepers and how it's not really fun to take a transfer on a keeper, and that's kind of my logic. As far as moving for Gabriel, yes, he's another option, but I think Gabriel is someone that I would prioritize just a little bit less than Perisic. And that's for me the reason why I've gone for Perisic in this tactical structure here within the 4-4-2 and moved away from going for Gabriel in my team, even though I think he still is a very, very interesting option. And a lot of people did ask in the previous video how I felt about Gabriel, why I thought he was more interesting than Walker. And really it comes down to the fact that I think he is definitely a key goal scoring threat. And it's the same reason why I think a lot of people have a lot of confidence in someone like Ruben Dias. We expect Arsenal to be a good defense. We expect them to get clean sheets. Yes, Walker is expected to play, especially since Cucurella didn't join City. But does he really get attacking returns? Definitely not at the same rate as someone like Ruben Dias. And when you compare that to someone like Gabriel, who has been imperious in the previous season in the air and is playing some really, really good opponents that you'd like to target specifically for that kind of aerial ability, I think Gabriel still makes a lot of sense. Just for now, I have moved away from him because I feel like the upside of moving into Saka, if I've made a mistake about Luis Diaz, is still there. And therefore, I've gone for Luis Diaz. And I'll move into the last option and discuss Martinelli. I just think between Martinelli and Saka, yes, Saka is someone who we expect to score most of the goals. We expect him to get penalties. We expect him to get a lot more attacking returns than Martinelli. But for a 2.0 million cost saving, I do think Martinelli is probably one of the best priced midfielders in the game. Ultimately, he will be playing for a team that we expect to perform as an attacking unit, probably as a top 4 or 5 side, and that's really what it comes down to. With Smith Rowe being out, you're just getting so much value out of Martinelli early, and if it seems like his minutes will kind of fall off a little bit later when Smith Rowe comes back, then I can think about reinvesting the funds that I've probably made into Martinelli when he gets price rises a little bit later. As I was saying as well, in the preseason, he's looked exceptionally good. We actually saw Nketiah come on to the team quite a few times, and Martinelli was also still staying on quite late into the games, and it shows for me Arteta has a lot of confidence in what Martinelli brings to the table. He's been very, very unselfish. And I think when he finds opportunities for himself too, he will find great avenues to score. I definitely don't say he's going to be someone who outscores Saka in terms of points, but I think when you're cutting off that 2.0 million and you're kind of evaluating them for the every 0.5 million that they're worth, Martinelli is probably just as good as Saka, if not better. And that's pretty much what it came down to with this draft, trying to create a little bit of balance with this team, having the flexibility to move away from some of the 8.0 options if Luis Diaz doesn't work out, For example, if we look at someone like Foden as an asset, he did miss the preseason for City. But if he becomes an incredibly interesting asset, and it doesn't seem like Grealish is going to really find his way towards the starting team of City, and Foden has established himself as a key player, then I can also see myself quite easily moving into someone like Foden, and I really like the flexibility of having that 8.0 spot available. And another reason too why I've not gone for triple City at this point. Now let's actually move on to the forwards. So with the forwards, I've actually gone for Haaland and Jesus. Nothing has changed from the previous draft. As I mentioned, the reason why I've moved on from Kane, even though I really think it's basically a 49-51 decision for me, 51 being Haaland in my mind, at least for now, is just I really like the chances that he was operating with in the Community Shield game. I just expect that to be much better when he's playing versus other teams. Yes, the West Ham game is slightly worse, but I can't really see myself being the manager that automatically starts the season with Kane and then in my head books a game week 2 transfer. That's just not really how I operate, especially since I don't have the flexibility in my, I guess, in my mind with not having zero point 0.5 minute in the back in this structure. So that's why I've gone for Haaland, and Bournemouth is going to be that game week 2 game where I seriously think about captaining him. So no reason not to start him in my opinion, especially if he is able to get very, very good chances versus Liverpool. Hopefully as well, we'll see him do well in games like Newcastle, which is going to be a tough game. But I also think he has great opportunities when you look at the pairing with Salah to think about, let's say, game week 5 where Salah's playing Newcastle to opt for a Haaland captaincy. There is quite a good partnership there and synergy. Perhaps it's actually better with Kane if you're a little bit more of a maverick. If you're let's say a Kane owner and you're already tempted in game week 1 to move away from the Salah captaincy, then that's actually a very, very good option that you can opt for. But that's completely up to you guys as a manager. I think I'm personally a little bit more swayed by Haaland for now, and I'm going to stick with this team. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys have a lovely day, and I'll see you guys in the live stream very, very shortly.